Cyclone Megan closing in on a powerful landfall in the Northern Territory on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for March 17th. So we have two active tropical cyclones. Obviously the prominent one is Megan, which is now a category 2 on the Saffir Simpson Scale, and the Bureau of Meteorology is still running category 3 on it on the Australian scale right now, with estimated winds near 105 miles per hour or 170 kilometers per hour sustained. 75 days until the Atlantic hurricane season, and there's not too much going on here. It's all in the extratropical zones, and a large thunderstorm area there over southern Texas, which has caused the remnants of a slight risk and down to a marginal risk later today. 58 days until hurricane season begins in the eastern Pacific, and things still look nice and peaceful. A few little areas of activity, but really nothing to talk about there. In the western Pacific, things are still looking rather quiet as well, apart from this lingering disturbance over the eastern Micronesian islands, but really nothing doing with that. And in the North Indian Ocean, it's still extremely quiet with hardly anything going on at all, as expected at this time of year. In the southern hemisphere then, starting with Cyclone Megan there in the Gulf of Carpentaria, not too far away from a landfall here, and Tropical Depression 18S, which is off the coast of Western Australia and is moving away, which is good news, and shouldn't be affecting the coast now at this stage. We can still keep tabs on ex-Cyclone Filippo as well, which is way down there in the cyclone graveyard in the Indian Ocean, and really nothing much to talk about with that. It's around 30 mile per hour winds, an estimated pressure of 10-12 millibars. In the South Pacific, we're still watching a 20% chance there that has just passed Fiji and is moving through Tonga at this time, moving southeastwards, and that still has a small outside chance of developing into a tropical cyclone. If it does, it will be very quick and very brief. Let's take a look at Megan then. Cyclone warnings in effect from Mornington West to Numbulwar, Groote Eylandt and Borroloola. It is 100 kilometers from North Island, 100 kilometers from Vandalia Island, 149 from Manangura, and just look at that cyclone warning as well for Woolagurang and Robinson River as well. It's 164 kilometers from King Ash Bay and 186 from Borroloola. So it is starting to get closer, still not moving particularly quickly, although we do expect that it will start to accelerate a little bit towards the southwest soon. Tropical Depression 18S is crawling further away from Western Australia. Very odd storm this has been so far. 504 kilometers from Barrow Island, 587 from Onslow, 590 from Exmouth, 596 from Karratha, and 1060 from the Christmas Island, and that is moving slowly towards the west with maybe a slight southerly element, so it won't be affecting either Christmas Island or the Cocos Keeling Islands. It's for the fish. Well, let's take a look at the latest satellite imagery then. First of all, a wide shot of the Australian region. You can see both of those storms, and obviously Megan looking very healthy there on the right hand side. 18S indeed not looking too bad, but still struggling with getting its winds in order. There's a close-up on Megan right now with the enhancement for the infrared, and is it an eye or is it high cloud tops? Maybe it's a mix of the two. It certainly does have an eye underneath all of those clouds. And there's 18S. Let's take a look at a few close-ups on this one. Well, it does look like the circulation is really struggling. It's very hard to tell where a circulation might be there. Not much rotation on those cloud tops anymore. Obviously the circulation might be just fine underneath all of that cloud, and that's our assumption at the moment, keeping it at tropical depression status. Latest indications only showing that it has around 35 mile per hour winds. Now there's Megan looking at some early images here, looking west, south-southwesterly actually, heading straight for those islands by the way, and it could make a direct pass over Borroloola as well. So it is a potentially very dangerous storm for those areas. Yes, the populations are fairly small, only around 1,000 in the path of the strongest winds, but that of course is still a significant consequence to these communities along the coast of the Gulf of Carpentaria. Extremely high cloud tops still, just waning a little bit in those latest frames, but still into the -90s in a few spots, and we clocked last night into the upper -90s as a matter of fact on some of the frames. Radar imagery is not looking so good because it's left some of the better radar coverage, and we've only got marginal coverage really, but you may have just seen that circulation just gradually moving south-southwest. And here's the rainfall occurring on Western Australia, partly associated with 18S, and it's producing some significant amounts of thunderstorms there as well. A quick look at the Gulf of Mexico and you can see that significant thing there. It's probably best to call it a thing. Untrained eyes might call it a tropical cyclone from a distance, but it certainly isn't. And there's a wide shot of the Australian region there as well, showing both of those cyclones. Obviously Megan looking much better. Sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific, well, potentially the equatorial area there is expanding those cooler waters, which means that a La Nina is very much on the cards. In the Atlantic, the Caribbean Sea is still looking good at 27 degrees Celsius for a large part of the area, entering the main development region as well, and a slight slick there of 26 degree waters up the Gulf Stream. In the Western Pacific, things are still looking decent there as well, from Guam through to the central Philippines, over 28 degrees Celsius waters, same for Palau. North Indian Ocean, those temperatures are still licking the coast of Bangladesh, 26 degrees Celsius waters. They're recovering near Myanmar as well. They've been a little bit below average there, so it is starting to cook in the North Indian Ocean. Southwest Indian still extremely warm off the coast of western Madagascar, over 30 degrees Celsius for a few spots there. Where Filippo was in the last few days, temperatures have decrease a little bit, but still looking decent there. They were above average. And off Western Australia, still a few spots that are over 30 degrees Celsius, and the Gulf of Carpentaria is definitely boiling hot at over 30 degrees Celsius, which will certainly help Cyclone Megan. South Pacific still looking decent as well in those lower latitudes, especially around Samoa, up to 32 degrees Celsius and around 29 to 30 degrees near Fiji. Where that system is over Tonga right now, it's still about 28. They'll be decreasing quite quickly soon though. Compared to average, the anomalies look like this. The orange zones are above average, the blue zones are below average, the Atlantic very much above average in the main development region and in the Gulf of Mexico. Doesn't mean much at the moment, but it could do later on down the line. The Western Pacific only slightly above average, and the Southwest Indian Ocean is still quite a lot above average actually, so keep watching that area and the Coral Sea. Oceanic heat content still looks very good in the Coral Sea and extending eastwards there. Anything green and above really is ample for tropical cyclone development. And in the North Pacific as well, there's quite a decent channel extending there in the Western Pacific, and even the Eastern Pacific still looking fairly decent, especially for this time of year. Well, let's take a look at what today's model runs have in store. Well, the GFS is still holding on to substantial intensification for 18S. Funny enough, it did back off on a model run yesterday, but it's now back again calling for a Category 1 or even a Category 2 there on the Saffir Simpson Scale, with a pressure estimate going down into the lower 970s. Briefly moving northwesterly and then turning westwards and then gradually west-southwest. Nonetheless, all roads lead away from the western coast of Australia. Megan there, a foregone conclusion of what it's going to do now. It's pretty much going to move directly through Borroloola. Just how strong will it be when it makes landfall? That's the biggest question. Looks like it will be a high-end Category 2, close to its current intensity right now. After it sweeps inland, it will move towards the west and will become no more rather quickly. Still a tropical storm on day 2, but by day 3 and day 4, it loses the northern gales and it becomes just a potent disturbance with strong winds sweeping through towards Western Australia in the end. Look carefully and you might see one or two storm signatures in the South Pacific. It doesn't quite get there, that first one, that's a 20% chance. And then there's a second one that moves through Fiji around the 20th of March, that's 3 days away, and then continues to follow in the same kind of vein really, all moving southeasterly, moving pretty quickly, and you can see we've marked both of them, their tracks there moving through. Both brief chances, but very low chances at the moment. Well, let's check back with the Australian region and check the rainfall estimates. That's also going to be a massive threat with Megan, but look elsewhere as well. The Cape York Peninsula and down towards Cairns as well is still in for a lot of rainfall too from general tropical activity, non-cyclonic. We are looking at very high amounts of rainfall in quite a few places. Near the landfall zone for Megan then, it's over 21 inches, that's over 500 millimeters of rainfall, and in some parts of the top end as well we could still see isolated amounts above 150 millimeters. On the top end of Cape York at 12 inches, 300 millimeters, and around Cairns it could still get up to around 24 inches of rain there. That's even more than what Megan's going to be producing, 600 millimeters possible in the next 7 days from just general tropical shenanigans. As for Western Australia from 18S, we're only looking at less than an inch now, that's 25 millimeters. In the longer range then, we're following 18S as it continues there. It does strengthen a little bit more, maybe getting towards high-end category 2 briefly, but it's no one's concern. It then drips or dribbles towards the south and then maybe actually recurving back on itself, which is the first time I've seen that, but it does completely lose its tropical characteristics by the time it does that. It's basically a sealing of its fate, and off it goes. And let's take a look at the South Pacific Coral Sea area, because in the medium range they are developing two new systems there as well, very close to each other, so certainly skeptical about that one. But here they are, just starting to develop around the 27th of March, that's 10 days out, so it's still really way too far out to talk about, but just give you a little idea of what the models are throwing up. But that is borderline silly range right there, so I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. And our Still Waiting for Hone t-shirts are absolutely still available, because Hone is not. If you know, you know. In the Scilly range, we watched those two cyclones moving in tandem, really, affecting New Caledonia, and then a third one forming behind it as well. I think that is a bit silly at the moment to suggest that, but certainly a potential later on down the line. And then a fourth cyclone forming there off the Cape York Peninsula would certainly be a very busy period if all of this verified. And those two strongest cyclones, the leading two, the first one dissolves very quickly, the second one absorbs some of its energy and swirls down towards the North Island of New Zealand, which gets buffeted with tropical storm force winds. On this day, March 17th, 2012, can you believe it's been 12 years already since then, Cyclone Lua was about to make landfall as a high-end Category 2, similar intensity to Megan, but in a different part of the country, making landfall along 80 Mile Beach there, with an eye starting to pop out just before it managed to make that landfall. Fairly small system, but a relatively intense one, peaking just as it made landfall and for a few hours prior to that. Well, we're code orange, which means that we're on quite a high alert right now for Megan, of course, making landfall later. In the Atlantic, the first name this season will be Alberto. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Aletta, and in the Central Pacific, it will be Hone. 12 storms so far this year. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Iwinya, and in the North Indian Ocean, it will be Rainfall. Certainly feels like the first strong landfall in Australia for a little while. The next name in the Australian region will be Neville. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, it will be Gamane, and in the South Pacific, it will be Peter. That's all from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow.